Sonic Frontiers is slated to release soon, and I want to be the best damn reviewer there is. So, here we go, my attempt to beat all 13 mainline home console 3D Sonic games in 7 days.
This was a dumb idea.
I'm a Sonic fan, goddammit! The spirit of Sonic is what matters!
Ready for Sonic Frontiers? No? Yeah, I'm the guy that beat every 3D Sonic game in a week. Yeah, I also 100% completed Sonic Frontiers shortly after. And yeah, I didn't like it very much. This is the part where I'd get shot, but I already did that joke in my Elden Ring video earlier this year.
Sonic Frontiers. It sure was a video game. Listen, I might be a jaded Sonic fan, but I'm still a Sonic fan. I'm tired of being upset all the time. I desperately wanted to love this game, and even tried to set aside the doubt that accumulated with each new trailer and gameplay video before release. That first demo footage should have sealed its fate, but I'm honestly impressed by the absolute 180 that Sega managed to pull with the marketing, despite changing very little of the actual game. Later trailers carefully displaying moments that look cool made Sonic fans assume this was it. This was gonna be the best Sonic game ever made.
I'm here to say that that is, not the case.
Sonic Frontiers is neither appallingly broken enough to be the next Sonic 06, nor is it brimming with enough creativity to redefine 3D platforming. It's just okay, which also makes it incredibly divisive. While it's clear Sonic Team finally had a lot more time to work on this one, and there are some things to appreciate, the final product still feels confined, and a boring game often ends up being less fun than a hilariously bad one. Pokemon Legends Arceus was a game that finally made some changes to a repetitive formula, and people loved it. I had my fair share of fun with it, but it still felt lacking. It didn't come close to the standards Pokemon should be reaching, especially for a home console game. From what I've seen and heard online, a lot of people are giving Frontiers the same pass they gave Arceus, that it's a promising first step. But I don't think a multi-billion-dollar corporation deserves to walk at a leisurely pace. For $60, this game needed to come out the gate hauling ass. I'll acknowledge that Sega finally allowed Sonic to move in a new direction, which after Forces, thank fucking God, and I get why people are enjoying it, but I wouldn't go so far as to say they did an amazing job. Being a Sonic fan is like eating dog shit for a decade and then being fed a piece of burnt toast as a treat. I don't think Frontiers is simply the product of crunch or management pressure. Sure, some minor bugs could use cleaning up and some mini games could be expanded upon, but Sonic Team got a lot of their ideas in, and even managed to talk Sega into giving them enough time for a real development cycle. But Frontiers doesn't feel like a game that needs a couple tune-ups, it feels flawed at its very core. So let's talk about this brand new open zone design that will supposedly influence the next decade of Sonic games, because I think it needs some work. While I usually try to avoid the dreaded gamer act of comparing things to one another, it's gonna be difficult here, since Frontiers has a knack for seeing ideas in other games and trying to glue them all together, throwing Sonic so far away from his usual territory that the experience ends up feeling bland and generic. Also, I want to discuss everything this game has to offer, so there will be spoilers ahead. Just letting you know. How much a video game holds your hand is often indicative of how much freedom it truly has in store, or how much the developers trust you to overcome challenges, especially when it comes to exploration. For a game repeatedly cited as having a focus on player freedom, Frontiers doesn't just hold your hand, it puts you on a child leash and yanks you by the neck if you try to color outside the lines. So many great platformers and adventure games are designed with the idea that the player has a brain, and might even want to use it. The smartest developers don't shy away from allowing their game to be experimented with. They encourage it. But to ignore the automated paths of Sonic Frontiers and forge your own route through platforming segments is to look the game dead in the eyes and say, fuck you. When it works, it feels pretty cool, but man, does it feel like an uphill battle. The camera will lock and rotate 3 times, ruining your dash direction. The walls and floors will send you flying. Trying to jump between rails instead of using springs or auto-hopping is a death wish. Most of the platforms on Chaos Island just say fuck it and lock you into a shitty 2D space with invisible walls. A platformer doesn't need to be super difficult so long as the player is given enough room to express their skill or be creative. But while most games say, hey, figure out how to get from point A to point B, Sonic Frontiers says, pick where you want to go? If you so much as touch a boost pad or spring, we are launching you to Brazil. This sentiment carries over into the combat, as every enemy is designed with an exact format and weakness. Throw the infinite kicks at the ball guy, draw circles around the impenetrable shield guys, ride the rails and dodge bullets to kill the flying mini-boss, dive through the sky to kill the spider, do quick time events until the shark gets knocked out of the sand. The fact that they gave Sonic a skill tree was promising, but make no mistake, this isn't some crazy Devil May Cry combo weaving or precise Souls-like dodging and parrying. Even on hard difficulty, mashing a few inputs for flashy animated combos after you pass the enemy's gimmicky challenge is all that stands between you and victory.
This game, I'm not afraid anymore. I can just hover in midair. What?
There were a few shining moments where the game felt genuinely exciting, like when I encountered this massive boss for the first time, but then the physics sent me flying backwards and clipped me through his arm. Or the supersonic fights, which were incredible set pieces until I noticed I was barely playing the game, as they repeatedly devolved into a series of cutscenes and quicktime events. Simply realizing that I was running around as Sonic and could turn and jump and go anywhere would fill me with excitement. The boost formula has never really been my cup of tea, but he controls better than he has in years. I was having fun. Moments spent running free through vast forests and deserts were the start of something amazing. For the split second before the game yanked me by the leash again, whipped the camera around, and told me to hold forward and time a few button presses. Sonic controls alright, but he doesn't control great. While you can go flying off ledges and rails with crazy speed, momentum isn't exactly this game's focus. There's a certain sense of flow in the original Sonic games found through making quick decisions while staying in motion, with high speeds given as a reward for skilled play. It's part of what made them so endearing. Momentum was also implemented into the early 3D games, but in Frontiers, Sonic feels incredibly stiff when engaging with his environment. He instantly travels at maximum speed the moment he hits boost or touches a rail, his light dash comes to a halt at the end of a line of rings, and the homing attack completely stops his horizontal movement, sending him straight up to let the game figure out what it's gonna lock onto next. As janky as the older games often were, I miss having to properly change between rails in midair or utilize the momentum of the homing attack inside and outside of combat as an extra movement ability, compared to the modern strategy of jumping and dashing past everything that'll usually slow you down. Also, call me crazy, but I don't think I should have to tweak a bunch of value sliders in the options to make Sonic control better. I usually leave that up to the developers in, you know, every other game I've ever played. Like this one little indie game I played last year called Solar Ash, where you play as a fast character in 3D open zones, but the platforming requires actual thought, and the boss fights are speedrun challenges on the backs of giant monsters, instead of mindless button mashes with a gimmick or two tossed in. Sorry, where was I? It's hard to achieve any real sense of flow in open exploration when so much control is repeatedly taken away from the player. The simple challenges scattered throughout each island might have been more fun if they were a real part of the world or could be chained together, but the game practically plays itself. You don't have to angle yourself on rails or aim yourself at a spring. Heck, you don't even have to turn left or right half the time. The game will rotate Sonic and the camera for you. This restrictiveness expands outward into the game's core open zone design, as there's no real sense of discovery. The environment doesn't mean anything since you aren't given the means to engage with it. You don't spend most of your time naturally exploring forests and caves or climbing trees, volcanoes, and ancient ruins. You jump on haphazardly placed platforms and springs floating above an empty landscape. There's also no points of interest other than the ones the game marks with giant question marks and glowing spires, and you can't even easily navigate to an area without placing a waypoint because the compass doesn't have any cardinal directions on it. Then why call it a compass? Almost every feature in Sonic Frontiers feels like a little RPG drip feed to artificially extend playtime because Sega couldn't risk another game being too short after Forces. There are stat upgrades that increment all the way to level 99, collectible gears, tokens, memos, keys, skill points, seeds, Cocos, purple coins, sorry, that's Mario. Wait, no, they're actually purple coins, and silly challenges that reveal the map in dumb little squares instead of complete portions at once. Hang on, this isn't inspired by Breath of the Wild, this is inspired by open world mechanics that got obnoxious a decade ago. If you manage to solve the crazy brain-busting puzzles that 9 times out of 10 are solved by drawing a circle, your reward is more rails to clutter up the map, in case you thought traversing the open world as Sonic was somehow boring. At its core, the exploration loop of Frontiers feels too simplistic to be engaging. There's no mind-blowing discoveries, intense speedrun challenges, or out-of-the-box puzzles to make the open world feel like anything more than a tech demo that gets old after an hour of running around. I wrote down a lot of my major thoughts concerning Frontiers in the first few hours, and I'm disappointed to say that nothing really changed after progressing through the rest of the game. On the first island, you gather the Chaos Emeralds, play 2 mini-games, watch cutscenes with Amy, and fight a boss as Super Sonic. It's not a bad intro. One could even say I had a bit of fun. Sonic's all confident walking up to a giant titan, and this motherfucker just...
Oh, he's dead.
I'm gonna crush him into a fun pace.
Oh my god!
Holy shit! Watching Sonic get his shit rocked creates a nice spark of determination to take down this massive threat. But while my excitement was momentarily reanimated after finally seeing Super Sonic again, I was sad to discover that the game doesn't get harder. It doesn't bend, it doesn't innovate. It settles into its Frankensteined mixture of ideas and tells you to play the same loop 4 times in a row. Go to the desert, gather the Chaos Emeralds, play 2 mini-games, watch cutscenes with Knuckles, and go Super Sonic. Go to the volcano, gather the Chaos Emeralds, play 2 mini-games, watch cutscenes with Tails, and go Super Sonic. One very welcome interruption to climb some towers, then head to a second version of the first island, gather the Chaos Emeralds, play 2 mini-games, watch cutscenes with Sage, and go Super Sonic. It almost frustrates me to say that my favorite parts of Frontiers were the traditional Cyberspace levels, because I wanted to be wowed by its new ideas. Funnily enough, the most fun I had in the entire game was during the first hour in level 1-2, where the S-rank speedrun timer is way tighter than any future level, forcing me to spend a good 30 minutes learning the movement and labbing little skips and routes to make it in time. Couple that with some insanely catchy electronic jams, and despite fighting stiff controls and a rigid camera system, Cyberspace is where some of Sonic's spirit shines brightest. But even Sonic's brightest stars start looking a little funky when you stare at them for too long. A good chunk of the level layouts are replicas of old stages. This one is Unleashed's tutorial stage, this one is Metal Harbor, and this one is City Escape, complete with the run down the side of the wall. The strange, unconscious feeling that comes from recognizing them isn't all bad, but I'm just too tired of Sega's over-reliance on nostalgia to appreciate the idea. And why did the levels have to be Green Hill, Chemical Plant, and Sky Sanctuary again? I get that they have some kind of story relevance, I'll even concede that they look better than any of the islands by a long shot, but hey, guess what most of the previous 3D Sonic game was filled with? Referencing old games is only cool if you give them the time to recover and breathe, instead of repeatedly throwing them at the consumer until they're flattened into a husk of the iconic titles they used to be. Martin, bets on level?
I love Green Hill Zone. I love Green Hill Zone.
I'm gonna go Chemical Plant again.
No, it has to be the 5th Green Hill Zone of this area. It has to be. Surely.
The aspect of Frontiers that baffles me the most, even more than the gameplay, is the art direction. To the game's credit, the cyberspace levels look fantastic. However, dropping Sonic into a Sega hire this man Unreal Engine-ass world with the blandest sans serif UI imaginable doesn't exactly do him any favors. I hate sounding pretentious about graphics, cause I'll play a game that looks like dog shit if it's fun, but gorgeous visuals and creative world designs have always been a staple of the Sonic franchise, from beaches to space stations to interstellar theme parks. But in Frontiers? Ugh. Blah. Blah. The 5 Starfall Islands are forest, desert, mountain, forest, and forest. Sonic does not fit within this dreary world or its overly realistic lighting, and how the Switch even loads this game up without screaming in pain is beyond me. Even in the moments where I forgot I was playing a Sonic game and thought the overworld looked somewhat pleasant, it wasn't long before hundreds of ugly rails and obstacles popped in throughout the sky like the Line Rider levels I made when I was 8. Every map is cluttered with objects, with no concern for what the horizon might look like with all those gray scribbly lines everywhere. Oh geez, did I just put up footage of Solar Ash again? A game where the world has a strong sense of cohesion and the rails feel like a natural part of the environment, silently contributing to the story as the fractured remnants of train tracks and buildings? And the main character looks like she's at home among several beautifully designed landscapes? My mistake. Sonic not feeling like he belongs in this cut and paste world is indicative of a larger problem, which is that Sonic doesn't feel like he belongs in most of what the game has to offer. The open zone objectives are an awkwardly inspired cluster of menial challenges. They've got Tetris blocks, directional floor puzzles, the bullet hacking minigame from Nier Automata, pressing sidestep, touching a ball, parrying bullets, which doesn't even have to be timed, you just hold it down. Very few of these are engaging objectives, regardless of the fact that they already contain little to no platforming. This one is just a hamster wheel. Kind of like a metaphor for the whole game. When it comes to the story, it's the same sense of disconnection. I'm all for a change of pace. Hell, I've been practically begging for a reset since Sonic Colors, but Frontiers comes off as too somber, too foreign. Taking a more serious approach to storytelling isn't a bad thing, but dark and melancholy doesn't automatically make a story good, especially when it concerns a bunch of colorful, oversized talking animals. The atmosphere is bleak, jarringly so, considering the entirety of Sonic's past. Despite Sonic's friends having been kidnapped before, and their usual confidence in the face of danger adding a lighthearted tone to more complex storylines, everyone just feels kinda sad. After hearing that Ian Flynn, the writer for the Sonic comics, was being brought on, the story was actually the one part of Frontiers I was feeling optimistic about, but then I read that Sega provided him with, quote, the story, backstory, plot beats, and usable characters, and just told him to make them speak. So what I want to know is, who really decided that the final boss should be a purple moon named The End? Not to say a purple moon named The End is out of place in a Sonic game, but I kinda wish The End was an active participant in the story, rather than just the disembodied voice of corruption that starts talking shit at the very end. You know, on one hand, playing Ikaruga is really cool, but on the other hand, what the fuck? Most cutscenes involve two characters standing around while slowly explaining every piece of lore to the people in the back who were too busy looking at their phones to pay attention. Ideas that are clearly presented through environmental storytelling and brief flashbacks are over-explained to death, and I cannot count how many moments consisted of this little child going, "Ooh, Sonic, my simulations say you're gonna die," and Sonic goes, "Haha, what the fuck does that mean?" And she goes, "I'm not telling you, it's hopeless," and pieces the fuck out. Each island is dedicated to building a side character, but they still don't get to do anything, idling around as helpless holograms while Sonic does all the fighting. I'm glad that Sega finally decided to revert the cast into actual characters, but a majority of the dialogue just feels forced and tonally inconsistent.
Sonic, do you think I can change?
What do you mean, like a tire or the tornado's engine oil?
No.
Frontiers is also hellbent on referencing the past, embedding every previous Sonic game into a jumbled new canon universe. This poses more questions than it ever answers and creates a bizarre character arc for Tails, who spends most of his time wondering if Sonic sees him as a burden, turning the terrible writing in recent games into a new lack of self-confidence instead of starting fresh. And while Easter eggs like the Fish Hits jingle in Big's minigame and the many references in Eggman's memos are neat, main story conversations feel awkward as characters repeatedly name-drop past events, bosses, and locations that would have little meaning to any newcomers.
That was on par with Dark Gaia, easy.
Or saved me from the Deadly Six's trap.
It's almost up there with the Eclipse Cannon.
Like on the egg carrier?
You stopped the arc, overcame Neo Metal.
I wonder if Cream and Styx are free.
Sonic Boom is canon? Overall, very little happens in the actual story of Frontiers, as most of its time is spent retelling the history of an ancient race that used to inhabit the Starfall Islands, as if this game is simply the prequel for a new Marvel-esque Sonic universe. Wait, what do you mean there were 2 after-credits scenes? Last, but certainly not least, I want to touch on the music. It makes sense that Frontiers isn't playing 200 BPM butt rock when you're drawing circles around a tree, but I can't say a moodier orchestral score always feels like the right choice either. The open-world tracks are beautiful as independent listens, but there's a bit of a disconnect between somber orchestral movements and a blue hedgehog bouncing around a big playground. The traditional jams are absolutely there in cyberspace and boss fights, and they're incredible as always, but the mysterious overworld tracks should be taking center stage, and I wish the game experimented with more dynamics instead of simply cutting between battle themes and overworld loops. The vocal themes go absolutely insane though. Every time I listen to them, I question whether or not the game was actually as bad as I think it is. Vandalize was a 1OK rock song about an intense breakup that was vaguely recontextualized into being about Sonic's adventure, but the lyrics are honestly a solid representation of what it feels like to be a Sonic fan.
Covered in scars, but roses are coming through the cracks. Come and leave your mark, vandalize my heart, fuck the pain away. My bed is in ruins. Hold on. Oh, yeah, this is the explicit version. Cause... No, I don't want to fuck Sonic.
Sonic Frontiers may be taking some steps, but sometimes I can't even tell if it's moving in the right direction. It's an awkward stumble, haphazardly inspired by other games that have long since crossed the finish line. Some people say Sonic will never work in 3D, but that's bullshit. I've played so many games in every genre imaginable, and trust me, the weirdest shit can work. So even though Sega finally decided to delay a game instead of marking another anniversary with disaster, Frontiers still didn't get to reach the heights it deserved. It's been stated in interviews that the game's producer, Takashi Iizuka, spent a lot of time fighting against management to really change things up. But this new installation feels so uninteresting that I don't think it could have been finished with more time. A few less glitches and wall clips wouldn't change a fundamentally grindy and repetitive approach to 3D platforming. I didn't want to end this video on a purely negative note, but it also feels a bit disingenuous to end on a purely positive one. Even now, I continue to write and rewrite these final thoughts as if my optimism alone will somehow put the long-lost pieces back together, but the reality of the situation is a bit more depressing. The little 6-year-old in me felt something here. I can tell that the artistic spirit of Sonic is still alive, from silly fishing minigames and dancing animations to crazy-ass metalcore music and a bullet hell shoot-'em-up against the moon. Yet at the same time, Frontiers gets so much wrong and hangs on to so many bad design choices from the past that it hardly even feels like we're back at square one. After over 15 years of repeated failures, moving Sonic from the dumpster to a slightly bigger dumpster seems to have been more than enough for many fans, but it's gonna take a lot more than an underwhelming tech demo to get a passionate "Sonic is back!" out of me. While it does feel like Sega's finally letting Sonic shoot for the stars again, I just don't know if I have enough faith left to believe he'll ever actually get there.